Do you have a comment, Madam Mayor?
I do. Contracts are bilaterally binding, so the city would have an obligation as well. We try to be equitable in the way we enforce such things, and so billing other entities that perhaps do not have such deep pockets as ExxonMobil, Imperial Oil, or Mammoet could be problematic for us. And what I came up to say earlier was actually about labor law that talks about exempt employees, and compensating them for overtime would set a precedent such that we might run into difficulty. I mean, we've come to appreciate that Gary puts in his 60 or 80 plus hour weeks on behalf of the city, and he does so with the expectation of the salary that he committed to and that the council regularly approves. So, if we're going to start compensating exempt employees for overtime pay, I think it sets a dangerous precedent for our city in terms of affordability, in terms of personnel, and treating all of our employees equitably.
Right.
The affordability is included with have somebody pay us for it.
Well, but I do.
And I'm not going to argue about it.
Pardon me, Mr. Chair. I do want to say, I just want to emphasize that, as I said at the outset of my memo, that this is a philosophical as well as a practical dilemma. There aren't easy answers here. I mean, there are real costs borne by the city of Moscow for putting law enforcement out there. On the other hand, our country was built on protest, and when there are issues that citizens, obstruct or prevent or dispute, I think we ought to listen up, and I think there are some really important considerations there as well. Thank you.
If I may, just to finish my point,
Okay.
the problem here is the recurring nature of this beast.
Fully understand.
If this were a one or two time thing, I don't know that we would be having this discussion about overtime and cost and all that stuff. But we're sitting here looking at a recurring event, and they've apparently got some number of loads down at Lewiston that they appear to still want to bring through Moscow. And the chief is talking about, what I heard, preparing to safely manage those events, and I'm thinking possibly at greater cost to the city of Moscow and its taxpayers than what we've had to date.
Gary?
Please don't misinterpret my comments. My comments are, whatever decision is made, I've got your direction. I'm looking for that direction and looking to administer anything in accordance with our set policies that have been approved by the council. So I'm not saying absolutely not, absolutely yes. All I'm saying is give this direction. We'll put it in the process and see what comes out. Now, there was one other decision here, and that is, I've not pursued it, but it is potential that we might be able to seek reimbursement through ISP's agreement with Mammoet.
That was
Is that an avenue you wish us to look at?
I'd almost rather look at that direction because, no matter if we're getting reimbursed, that's the key. But if we're getting reimbursed by ISP, this kind of goes along my line of questioning for you, Chief. How do our mutual aid agreements work? Does ISP have the authority to, I guess, for lack of a better term, deputize the City of Moscow Police Department for whatever situation is going on?
No, since the Idaho State Police have concurrent jurisdiction, there is not a mutual aid agreement within the city that's come in. We would have to talk to them, but we would not, and I would not be in favor of billing another partner for services rendered. And as you know, in mutual aid agreements, that is the indemnification is we do not absorb costs from another jurisdiction. We send our resources over at our cost. So if we did use that tool through the process, maybe ISP would be the intermediary, and we would be able to work with them, send them the information under a contract, and then they would forward that reimbursement up through the city.
Yeah, and that would be my recommendation as well, that we first determine whether or not that's even a possibility. If it is, then we pursue that. If we're not, then if the council desires to seek reimbursement anyway, we will proceed with the second, and that is to do a cost accounting request from Mammoet. And again, I still have to meet with Mr. Bland to discuss what the council direction is. So I should have some additional information before we meet again.
Go ahead.
Chief, not that you're giving up your jurisdiction, but a good bit of what's been done here with your forces has been at the request of ISP. So would that not possibly lean it toward a request for reimbursement under the ISP contract or from ISP? Again, we've got a special circumstance of recurring events here is where I'm coming from, not your usual, there's a fire at the Whitman County line, they need Moscow's help.
I think the way that I would couch it is you, ISP, already have an agreement with Mammut. Is it possible for us to account to you the time and you to submit that time wherever you're getting your funds from? So we're not asking them, as I think the chief's concerned about, sending ISP a bill that's holding them responsible any more than they would send us a bill when we ask them for help, as we did on the recent homicide in Moscow.
Chief?
Yeah, and also to try to clarify, they don't request a certain amount. They leave that discretion to my staff and let us do that along with some other considerations that we might want to bring to the table, is that Latah County has also brought in resources on this.
That was my next line of question. How is the county, the sheriff, is he pursuing this same avenue at some point, or waiting to see what we're doing?
Not at this point.
Don't know.
Their resources have mostly been on-duty resources, and my interchanges with the sheriff at this point are just the same. We're not considered about the reimbursement, the public safety side.
Right.
Dialogue with the sheriff and the commissioners probably needs to be brought in onto the table, but that would be, I think, maybe something that I could pursue with ISP and then let them make their own direction.
Yeah, because it seems to me, we have our public safety issue with drawing officers from other parts of town to help in this. I mean, if they're drawing on-duty officers from the rest of the county to assist in this situation, then that even leaves a bigger
Gap.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. So, I think the direction of this committee is to seek reimbursement in some way. Whether we can funnel it through ISP is a question. Is there a way to go through ITD? Is that a possibility? But I think per event seems to be we don't know if they're going to decide to ship these back down to Pasco and go another direction. Is that why obligate ourselves to a certain amount or them to a certain amount? I don't want to obligate us to anything as far as that goes, Chief.
Yeah, that was one of the concerns I have when we do go into a contract. As the mayor said, that is a binding agreement with us, and I still want the ultimate say to stop these loads if there is a public safety concern in this part. The information we received today is that our 60 more loads in Lewiston, their preferred route at this point is still Highway 95. 12 is open to the border, but it's still in litigation. There are 250 more that will be coming in this direction where they're currently at the Port of Vancouver. My recommendation to them is no more. To Lewiston, whether they heed that, that's their choice, but I still would like the ultimate say of being able to assess the situations as they come through, and they have the same concerns to safety of their personnel.
Well, and I would imagine they have this concerns of the safety of the public as well. I mean, what I worry about, I don't want to go into it too much because then you give somebody an idea. It's like the terrorist annex to the Latah County Hazard Mitigation Plan. It's not necessarily out there for everybody to read because you don't want to give anybody any ideas. So, but I think that. Do you have enough direction for now as far as seeking reimbursement in this?
Yes.
Okay.
We'll get additional information, and I'll meet or call Mr. Bland and see if we can get some of that information as well.
Gary, and I'm not asking for an answer, but it might be possible to structure an agreement that doesn't obligate us. In other words, merely that if we perform, we will be paid, but that because there are some yes buts in the ISP agreement that I saw, so that they're not under hire in a certain fashion, so there might be some way to, I know attorneys don't like one-sided agreements, but this might be a call for one.
Well, we use letters of understanding quite a bit. A contract, in order to be binding, has to have obligations on both sides. So, city attorney, as he is drafting something like that, would have to have something that would make it a binding agreement. So,
Yeah, the ISP one is called a memorandum of agreement. Sure. It's not a contract.
the term agreement is the operative agreement.
Okay.
It's the
All of the
operative term.
attorneys.
Tom, do you have something?
I guess I just wanted to respond to about the reimbursement piece. It certainly makes sense that the city of Moscow seek reimbursement for the costs to the city, and I guess I don't see it as just the individual officers that are being paid overtime. I too see that there are other costs to the city of Moscow, and perhaps there's some way that we can seek it within this pursuit. It seems to me that, whether it's a piece of the chief's time or a piece of your time or somebody else's time, there is
a cost
worth
there.
making a case. And I think that, if we are able to respond to the Sustainable Environment Commission's 2 points in the letter where they're saying, let's ask ITD some of these questions to gather more information, I think it would be helpful for us to anticipate those costs to us, not just as taxpayers of the state of Idaho, but also, what might those impacts be to the roadway, for example, in the future. We have one piece of the North Couplet up here, which has a subgrade failure from a while back, I think.
From when it was built.
And it's never been fixed. So if that hasn't been fixed yet, what's going to happen if we see other problems down the road? And so I think that we've got some direct and potentially indirect expenses that we should be, trying to pursue within this. So I think it's worth it for us to pay attention to the points in the letter where we might be trying to seek more information. And earlier there was a decision to not seek those 2 points, but I still think that we should.
I think it's all part of the whole
It's
system.
part of it. And the three of us function on the Transportation Commission, and for a long time we were looking at a bypass around Moscow because of the recognition
This
that
sort of
Highway
thing.
95 does carry an industrial load. Maybe this gives us more of a case to say, hey, ITD, we need to rethink.
ITD was not the problem with that. They didn't stop it.
They didn't stop it, but they're allowing the loads to run through. So I think we need to pay attention to those things.
Agreed. Thanks, Tom.